Good afternoon, everyone. I don't want to interrupt lunch, and it is a beautiful lunch. This session is called the Africa Files, so we are opening Africa Files, and positive Africa Files is we take our continent forward. And I know that I'm talking to very learned people in the room. Just know that, let me repeat, Africa is a continent, not a country. With that in mind, I think I want to ask if I was in the country, I was going to say honorable, and I am in India. So our Deputy Minister, Ms. Mashego Dlamini, Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation in South Africa, that has been leading a very important global justice project. I also want to invite to this conversation Ambassador and Special Envoy of the President of the African Union, Said Abbas Ahmed, is with us. Present with us as well is representing the Ministry of External Affairs in India, Punet Roy Kundal, Additional Secretary. Sitting on my right, but definitely left, is Rachel Toku Apia, who's representing the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, offices based in Johannesburg. There are many Sarahs or Saras, depending on how you want to pronounce the name. Mine is pronounced Sarah Musweza. We have someone representing Morocco in the Policy Center for the New South, Sarah Hassana. Okay, she's going to do that for me, as you would imagine. So, this conversation, now that I've introduced the speakers, this conversation is about Africa, as I said, and it is not about us coming here and begging for dollars or any other cash or funding. It is about economic integration, a conversation amongst ourselves on what are the opportunities, and without wasting any more time, we're going to have this discussion, and then we're going to we have about 50 minutes now, 48 minutes for this discussion. We are certainly going to allow you to also ask questions so that you are part of the conversation about Africa's future, economic future. Let me start with, at home. Let me start with our Deputy Minister, Mashego Dlamini, and ask everyone this question. What are the opportunities for our continent in terms of economic integration? And everyone will respond to that question, and I'm going to ask specific questions about debt and infrastructure and security and many other things that we're going to talk about. Deputy Minister, opportunities, economic integration for the continent?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Well, in the continent, we are so fortunate that after we have battled with COVID, and we have also learned some lessons how African continent has really suffered on COVID. At the same time, our president was also the chairperson of the African Union at a very difficult time in 2020. We came up with a program of establishing the Continental Free Trade Agreement that will really connect the whole continent in terms of raising our economy and also making sure that we trade at a very same level as African countries. As quite aware that we are trading separately and differently, and the tariffs become differently in all the countries. But after we have established the Continental Free Trade Agreement, it has come to the light that as African countries, we can pull together our resources and trade amongst ourselves, and also approach the global trade together, and also start to capacitate each other within the continent. So it has started to operate in 2021 in January, and last month, our president has been launching the first consignment that is taking the route of the free trade agreement. So now I'm looking forward to that as African countries, really, these are the issues that will really make our countries to benefit and also help each other to grow our economy.
Thank you very much. I think trade is important in our continent, and I am grateful for that. Let me move to Ambassador. Ambassador, what do you think are our opportunities in the continent in relation to economic integration?
Thank you for, first of all, saying that Africa is a continent, not a country. It's a huge continent of 54 countries. And I've served from the southernmost tip of in South Africa to Cape Agulhas, to being ambassador in Tunisia, which is Cape Angela, which is the northernmost point. So having traversed the entire continent, I completely agree with you on that. Africa is nothing but for us, if you look at the world. I think if you look at 1950, for example, 10% of the world population lived in Africa. By 2050, it's going to be 25%, which means 1 in 4 citizens of the world is going to live in Africa. Now, the kind of impact that's going to have on the world in terms of geopolitics, geoeconomics, trade, consumer goods, demand for electricity, whatever you say, that's the continent where you should be looking at. We have some very simple statistics. The African Development Bank says that Africa would require about $170 billion per year for infrastructure. You can raise about 70 billion internally. You'll still have a shortfall of about 100 billion. And that's where the external players start coming in. Let's look at electricity. Between 2010 and 2040, you will quadruple your demand of electricity. Now, that has to come from somewhere. Vision 2063, the Agenda 2063, for example, has these elements inbuilt into it, which is effectively a reflection of the SDGs, and I would say plus, because you're talking of infrastructure, along with the softer goals of the SDGs in that. Potential-wise, if you were to kind of look at it, then the internet economy, and again, I'll quote another report. This is the IFC Google report, which says that there'll be, the internet economy can be roughly 180 billion by 2025, which would represent 5.2% of your GDP, entire Africa, and $712 billion by 2050, which would represent 8.5%. So you can see there's a huge demand for things going up there. One last statistic again. Now Africa has the world's 40% of the world's arable land, but produces just 10% of the world's food. Now the meeting of the permanent representative last year was focused on food security. And this year's thing, the PRC, we just met, and just before the summit last week, focused on education. And maybe eventually I will come to how we place ourselves, India places itself in this matrix. But since you talked about Africa, I thought it's good for me to just put it in perspective as to what potential and what hope Africa holds for the rest of the world. Thank you.
It's the size of the continent and its potential for trade, right? Let's move to maybe Ministry of External Affairs India, right? I think it is important to note the connections with the continent from India's perspective, but from India's side, let's just get an input on how we think this economic integration should look like. What are the opportunities? Maybe let me ask you to come in on that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Moderator. On the Indian perspective, I think as a member of the cabinet of the President Azali, who led the negotiation for the finalization of the G20, we have a lot of conversation with the Indians, and we had the opportunity to meet them. But I think what we Africans needed to do, first of all, is stop to produce what we do not consume and import what we consume. I think if we can start from there, India is exporting lots of rice in Africa. I had the opportunity to live in Congo, in Mali, and in Niger. Around the river in Niger, they used to produce a lot of rice, lots of commodity that we need, but now we import those commodities. Same for Congo, same for many other African countries. So we had a very good relation with India on fishery, because we have an agreement with the AU, with many other, we are an island. So as an island, we have a lot of fish, and many countries came there to fish. So how we can make sure we do not only sell the fish, but we sell the fish and we have an industry, we can transform them, because it's the same for all African countries with the agreement with AU, European Union. They came, they fish, and they go to transform over there. And this go on all what we produce. And maybe we can finish on the cobalt. Everybody is speaking about electrical cars. Cobalt is in Africa. We have almost all the reserve. So now we will stop to export cobalt. Please, if you want to take the cobalt, come there, do your battery, do everything, but we cannot anymore export free cobalt for for almost nothing, and then we bought the battery, very expensive. So I think we can start from there, as India has the technology, has the will, so let's please start to build factory in Africa.
Let me use that. Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think it's always good to have this conversation where we ask India, or we tell India where we want to cooperate now that we are in India. And let me move to Morocco. I don't know if you represent Morocco, Sarah, but you don't represent Morocco, but you have ideas about economic integration. So let's hear your ideas about economic integration.
Thank you for precising, because I am from Morocco, but I work in an independent think tank called the Policy Center for the New South, which is based in Rabat. And I think it's very important to highlight, well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and what can I say after these very interesting introductions to the topic? I think one thing, just to remind the context, I think when the world was turning down on multilateralism, and when we witnessed, for instance, in Europe, questions on whether the European Union would survive to the Brexit and so, we saw an interesting move in Africa, with African countries going even stronger to move forward and to a higher level the regional integration, and move it to the continental level. So I think it's very important, the timing. 2018 is an important timing to set it in the global context. And of course, it went even faster with countries ratifying, and the COVID was also an instigator, like pushing countries to even think more of the integration, because we've seen how supply chains have been affected through COVID, and it was the right time to start looking at each other and see where the opportunities were. So the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has the ambition to further connect African countries so that they can develop their trade. It's a market now of 1.3 billion people. I know it's not the size of India, but still it's coming together to be an interesting market for investors. It's also good to highlight that together, right now, if we have all the African economies, like all the GDPs put together, it's $3 trillion. So the aim of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is to enhance trade and cooperation, because historically, African countries have established very high tariff barriers, with each other, because they felt that they had to protect their market for some time. And I think they felt ready to push it to another level and start seeing where they can converge, where they can be complementary. I think the example of rice was given. And I think it's also the fact of stopping from sending and exporting raw materials to, at the end, import refined and transformed products, which is very costly, because we're not, we need to ramp up our position in the global value chain and have an added value that is more interesting for us. So I think, you know, it has a good potential. I think there is a World Bank report, just to quote from another report, that highlights the potential of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement of having $450 billion in extra revenues by 2030, and propelling the African economy to reach $29 trillion by 2050, which is actually interesting to see, especially that currently the European Union's global GDPs are $14.9 trillion. So it's $29 trillion is a serious level. So I think it is an interesting move from African countries. Now it is about sitting with each other, looking. There is a trade observatory, an African continental observatory that was established so that to enable different countries to see where the opportunities are, where the products, which products would be interesting to trade with each other. And I think it's about now about providing the private sector as well with the necessary capacity to meet with each other, to exchange on common opportunities, and of course be attractive to investors, to other countries wanting to step in to develop African infrastructure. So I think there is a lot to do, but just to open up the conversation with this.
Thanks, Sarah. Rachel, economic integration, particularly in relation to infrastructure development?
First of all, thank you for this opportunity. It's really an honor to be here with all these esteemed panelists. Hard act to follow. So I see a number of opportunities. There are opportunities around women's economic power, digital public infrastructure, education, and R&D and innovations. But I'll delve into the digital public infrastructure for now. The infrastructure that we need to build, there's the hardcore physical infrastructure, but there's also digital, which we know, and especially during the pandemic, we had a proliferation of digital tools. We saw that countries that had digital infrastructure in place were better able to respond. And for me, it is like building the highways. Once you have that, you can then have on top of that things like the health apps, things like agriculture, where you have access to market information, you have access to tools around innovation, timing of when to plant. And so this is something that if we can get in place, even in terms of the young people from the continents, many of them moving to other countries where they see more opportunities being available. If you've got digital public infrastructure in place, it allows you to do much more, even from a distance. And this is where we see an opportunity in the education system. So we know this year they've declared AU Year of Education, and a big part of it is upskilling our youth in order to enable them to take part in this new, there's the fourth industrial revolution, but to be able to fully leverage this particular infrastructure. And it's working across the continent in a way that allows them to make the most of the size that they have and to build infrastructure that is based on what we're calling digital public goods. In the past, we've had tools available, but many of them tie you to one supplier, and it's very costly then to build on top of it all the additional applications that you need to expand and to make the most of it. And so during India's G20 presidency, this was a big focus of theirs in terms of getting this on the agenda. They launched a fund, I think it's $25 million at the end of it, to support countries. So there's an opportunity for us also to do what we call South-South learning, where there are other countries in the Southern Hemisphere who have had similar experiences, similar situations, and have been able to develop innovation, to develop tools that we're able to build on. And so I'm hoping as we move forward, as you know, AU is now a member of the G20, we have another southern country, Brazil, as president of the G20, that will be able to strengthen collaboration and make the most of opportunities like that to advance the continent's economy.
Thanks, Rachel. Maybe let's, we've been too optimistic. Let's talk about maybe three challenges that I think are facing the continent at the moment. The historical debt issue, sometimes sanctions here and there. I'm thinking about my neighbors in Zimbabwe, thinking about security challenges. So maybe let me ask again the panel, starting with the Deputy Minister and then Ambassador, and then we'll move to India and we'll follow the same route. On any of those challenges, how do you think we could overcome those challenges? Panel members, Deputy Minister.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Well, in the continent, we are faced with many challenges. The first challenge is the huge debt that the countries are facing. And the second one is the insecurity that it keeps on crippling, unconstitutional takeover of states and all that, which really, I feel it will really disturb the big move that we are starting to do and our unity in the continent. But nevertheless, we're trying our best in all the regions. I think we have got structures that are put in place to respond on some of the issues. For example, at SADC, as you're quite aware that we had some disturbance around Mozambique with the insurgents that came there, but the SADC has responded very swiftly. So things are coming well, and the situation is really coming to a better place. So I hope that as the continent and within the African Union, we need to get support in terms of really putting together, integrating our security so that, and when issues erupt anywhere, then we quickly respond, because those issues are really disturbing the livelihood of our people and also disturbing the trade that we are so eager we want to do in the continent. So my feeling is that as a country, as South Africa, we are open. That's why we are moving in different countries where there are conflict. My president led a delegation to Ukraine and Russia to make sure that the two leaders and the two conflict people must really sit around the table and look at the issues. Of course, they have also called for the opening of the trade, which really never benefited Africans. Well, it has been agreed, it has been opened. I think an AU delegate here will really speak more about it, because it also benefited Europe instead of benefiting Africa, because that war is really putting more strain in terms of food security in Africa, putting more strain in agriculture. We are really disturbed in that regard, but definitely we couldn't benefit as much as our African leaders had to intervene, but they intervened for the benefit for somebody else. So that was really the challenge. We don't know whether that was going to be changed. Thank you very much.
You've preempted a very heated discussion. I know that AU is very passionate about this conversation and this aspect of the conversation. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Before I jump on the issue of seeds with Russia, I think the global challenge we have in Africa is governance. Governance is the major challenge. Last year, we Comoros, we shared the AU, and we could not have one single meeting with the office because of the war between Morocco and Algeria that stopped to have one delegate from North Africa. So we had a meeting with the member of the bureau, but we could not have someone from North Africa, and we knew the next presidency will be in North Africa. So we need them in the office of the presidency. But we could not, because they refused to agree who will be seats there. So we ourselves need really to challenge the way we lead the governance. AU itself supposed to be the headmaster. So we have a problem with the coup d'etat, and we ban many Sahel countries, so they cannot come in the meeting, but the sanction itself did not produce what we were expecting. Head of state are still traveling, people are suffering, so we needed to challenge the sanction. Should we put a sanction, Or should we find a way to deal with the coup d'etat? So that's, for me, it's the major issue. If we handle governance, then we can challenge everything. Because we say, this is the rules. But some of our brothers will break the rules, and we don't do nothing. And so if we can fix it, for sure, it will be very different. And then back on, and this is linked with the way we lead the AU. All our decisions are made by consensus. And that takes the whole day. Every time we have 2 days to decide what we do, because a small country like us, we want to be heard. But then Nigeria, South Africa, and Algeria, and Egypt can find a deal, and then things are done. We cannot resist. So how we found the better way to challenge ourselves, to make a better governance, and to make a better decision process, that will help to resolve all our conflict, all our insecurity. And so that's very important. On the debt, before we finish with Russia, let's say something, because I had this opportunity to go with President Ramaphosa, President Azali, President Al-Sisi, and no, President Al-Sisi was not there. He sent his minister of, Prime Minister. So we met President Putin on the issue of the cereals. And President Putin said, okay, I'm ready to release, by the way, President Ramaphosa and all African presidents said, we are not here to beg. We are here to ask to do business. You put the seed on the market and we buy. There is no way you give us for humanitarian initiative. We don't want humanitarian initiative. We want business. Put the seed on the market, tell the price, and we buy. So President Putin said, I cannot put the seed on the market because the last time the AU told me, oh, Africa are suffering, so please open the market. I opened it. Only 3% went to Africa. The rest went to Western Europe and South Europe and everywhere. So he said, if you want me to make a business, then let's remove the ban. But of course, AU and states refuse. So you see, people are saying, oh, we do that for Africa. That was not for Africa. That was for Europe. Europe take 97% of the seeds. We get only 3%. On the issue of the debt, I think we can change the rules, and that we need India, Brazil to come together with Africa. Let's convert the debt on education debt or health debt. Instead of sending back the money, you can say, you India, or you Brazil, or you America, or you Europe, we say, okay, you owe me 3 million. On this 3 million, you will put it on education, you will put it on healthcare, you will put it on strategic issue. That will change the development. That will change the dynamics. And as my sister here said, public digital infrastructure can be a strong leverage to change the dynamics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. India, I think from India's side, Puneet, you mentioned some of these things, but maybe let's challenge you to talk about debt from India's perspective.
I think the question you asked was exactly the three challenges facing Africa. Let me first, I don't think the mic is working. I think the question you asked was the three challenges facing Africa. So let me first just give you my perception of what I think are the challenges facing Africa in a very brief. The first, which Ambassador Ahmed also referred to, is that of raising investments. Now, the costs associated with raising those investments are very high because the rating agencies give abysmally low ratings to African countries. As a result, your interest rates go up, your insurance costs go up, and there is a general disincentive to invest in Africa. Now what happens is the countries which actually need money don't get it, and the countries that don't need money have the easiest access to money. So this inverted logic, and therefore what Ambassador said, he said we need countries like India. Yeah, certainly, I think that logic holds true in a bilateral sense, but also in a multilateral sense. The second issue that I see with Africa, of course, is what we went through, the issues of food security. And like I had mentioned in the beginning, 40% of the world's arable land, 10% of the world's food. There is a mismatch here. There's a certain mismatch here. And therefore, raising that food productivity, raising food levels, raising nutrition levels, has a multiplier effect on the entire economy, on entire countries. I'm not going to talk about education and health. I mean, he's already mentioned that. But the third one, I'm going to be slightly more, let me say, esoteric here, is the perceptual challenges that Africa faces. Now, the moment I say Africa, it evokes images in the minds of people. So to some people, you can think of colorfully attired tribes, you'll think of wildlife, you'll think of, felled plains, you'll think of sunsets and rivers and so on. And these have then been further kind of buttressed with the films that have come out through, Hollywood. I'm saying Amistad, I'm saying Blood Diamond, I'm saying Black Panther, I'm saying Coming to America. You keep naming the films one by one. And so these images get bolstered one after the other. Also, historically, I think there's an injustice that has been done to Africa specifically has suffered, and that is in the 15th century, when the age of discovery, when people went sailing around the world, Mercator got out the map which kind of put the latitude and longitudes on a straight lines. This had the effect that today the map that you see, Africa looks a little bigger than Greenland. In practice, in actual, Greenland is just a dot on the map, because Africa by itself is bigger than the US, China, India, and Europe put together. And there's still space left to grow food after that, despite the fitting in all the other countries. Therefore, these perceptual challenges, I think, are also extremely important for Africa to handle before you can actually talk of health and education and raising funds and so on and so forth. How do we come into it? Let me just take two very small topics, education and health. There are about 25,000 African students who study in India now. They're here, they live with us. We welcome them. I think they're a part of the Indian family. We have also, now education, I would also extend it to capacity building. Say in the past 10 years, all across Africa, we have provided capacity building short-term courses to more than 37,000 government people, private sector people, NGOs in India at our expense. Now, we also are just not inviting people to study here. Under the new education policy that came out 3 years back, it allows institutions of higher learning to set up campuses abroad. So last year was a landmark year for us because two of our public universities, the National Forensic Sciences University set up a campus in Uganda, in Jinja. And then we had the Indian Institute of Technology, which is a brand, which is the premium institution for engineering studies. It set up its first campus abroad anywhere in the world, in Tanzania, in Zanzibar. Therefore, this is an element that really should really it excites me to say that we have these kinds of collaborations going on. Then we had the Open University of Kenya, tying up with the Indira Gandhi National Open University for distance learning programs. Now, that's the kind of programs that really will go a long way, because there we just don't give, we share both ways. On health, of course, I need not remind everyone that during COVID, India was the only country that opened up its doors when the rest of the developed world was stockpiling the vaccines. We sent out close to 42 million vaccines across the world. And these vaccines really form the backbone of the vaccination program in many, many African countries. We, of course, are the pharma giants of the world. South Africa would recollect that at the point of time in the early part of this century, the cost of treatment of AIDS was like $70 a day. Step in Indian generics, it falls down to $1 a day. Now, that's the kind of strength that Indian pharma carries with that. That's the kind of collaboration we want to build. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe instead of going to Sarah, let me come to Rachel. You also have interest in education, particularly in health as an opportunity for South Africa growth. And you can see my biasness as soon as I talk about Africa, I go to South Africa. And you based there, so Rachel.
No, thank you. Thanks. Before I come to the education system, there is another challenge that I think I'd like to highlight. And this is around our supply chains. South Africa is my second home. I love it. But I was born in Ghana. And Ghana, we produce cocoa. In order to produce the cocoa in Ghana, we use fertilizer. For that cocoa that is produced to meet the organic standards, for export to the EU, it's a particular kind of fertilizer. It comes from Rwanda. Rwanda produces the fertilizer, ships it to Europe. Additional costs are added to it, significant. It comes back to Ghana. Ghana produces the cocoa solids, but it is all being geared. The supply chain is for it to be exported back to Europe. If you're based in Ghana and you want to make chocolates, you need to buy the cocoa solids, but it's at a premium. You pay 20% extra tax because it's all geared for for export and not for local sale. And so it goes to Europe, it goes, across the world, they make the chocolate, it comes back, and we pay a premium for it. Why? Because the infrastructure, the supply chains to send that fertilizer direct from Rwanda to Ghana doesn't exist. I'm probably giving my age away, but there was a time when Skype, you could make calls. And I remember in those days, if I wanted to call the US, it was 1 cent a minute. If I wanted to call Ghana, it was $1.63 a minute. So if I am going to do business with another country in Africa and have a conversation just to present my proposal, the amount that I'm going to spend on communication is 163 full times more. If you look at the scale of that, many of us, even when we travel and try to travel across the continent, you find that the flight routes are such that it is often easier to fly outside the continent and back into the continent. So our supply chain is something that we need to address. And I want to delve a little into it using R&D. The continent wants to manufacture its own vaccines. It's important. If we do it well, we're going to be able to not only meet the needs of the continent, be able to get our immunization coverage up to the levels that we want, but obviously we'll be creating much needed jobs on the continent. But we need to harmonize the regulatory sector. We've got the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. It's going to allow us to move goods across borders much more easily. But the regulation of those goods to make sure that they are of the quality that we need is something that needs to be addressed. And so the evolution of Africa's regulatory system from 55 countries to one that is united under the Africa Medicines Agency, so that we have a single regulatory network, is something that we are supporting to address one of these challenges around the supply chains and the infrastructure that is required to make at least health goods move along. And I will respond to the education one next time.
Thanks, Rachel. Let me give Sarah an opportunity to respond.
Okay, is it working? Thank you very much. I think if I had to mention 3 challenges, I think many have been already mentioned, but I think the first one is a problem of connectivity. And it really, because sometimes we are in one of the African countries feeling that we are going through some challenges or hurdles by ourselves, but the solution is just next door. And this is just one example to pick up this is just to pick up on Rachel's example about fertilizer. For example, Morocco has been very, moving forward on developing fertilizer production plants in Nigeria, in Ethiopia, and I think it's really the aim is to find the transformed product, find the needed fertilizers that would respond to the soil's needs, to the specificities of each country. And I think, as it was mentioned, depending on the source, it's either 40 to 60% of arable land is in Africa. So I think there is a great potential around this to respond to the challenge of food insecurity in the continent. The second challenge that I would like to mention is related to climate change and to the need to address also energy transition and try to see the potential of solar power, hydroelectricity in different countries and try to look at it as in pools, as a hub, and see how it can benefit different countries around, so that it's not a matter of conflicts. For example, when countries have to share water resources or so on, they look at it from a win-win perspective, benefiting all countries in the same region. And I think, so not to overdevelop on this, I think the third challenge that I would like to mention is that, yes, there is a data that we should take into consideration is that Africa has the highest number of landlocked countries. So we have 16 landlocked countries in Africa, which is something that is very important to address, specifically that landlocked countries are also the very hardly hit by climate change effects, by drought, and sometimes also affected by conflicts. So I think it's very important to, when thinking of integration, thinking of these necessary corridors that would provide landlocked countries with the sea access and see the potential in our oceans, our seas. But for this, I think, it needs funding, so there are a lot of interconnected challenges. I think it's just about really drafting a clear roadmap at the institutional level within the AU and bringing together countries to talk and to exchange on different experiences, although it might be hard sometimes to get countries together, but I think it's just the dynamic, especially when you have over 50 countries meeting together and 54 countries getting together is quite difficult to manage. So I think it's an institution that has the tradition of building consensus, and you need stamina for this. So I think there are challenges, but many opportunities out there for the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have 10 minutes. I have many questions that I wanted to ask, but let me allow all of you to also participate in the conversation. I will take maybe four questions. There's 1, 2, 3, and then there's 4 at the back. The fifth one. All right. Let's start with these 3 questions on this table, and then right at the back, and then we'll move here. More than happy to move.
Hello, my name
You
is...
can just introduce yourself, please.
Yes. Hello, my name is Clara. I work for the International Committee of the Red Cross. And it was just very fascinating to listen to all of you, so thank you very much for that. What I wanted to ask, in the course on the so-called war on terror, the US used this to, let's say, encourage Swiss banks to collaborate more closely. And so that citizens who have an account in Switzerland this must be then transmitted to the US, basically. And what I wondered about was whether with greater economic integration and sort of speaking with a more unified voice, this type of pressure or leverage would be something that might also be envisioned by African countries.
Thank you. Second question.
Good afternoon. My name is Fumi Oriagba. I'm Nigerian. I work with Heineken in Ireland as a procurement manager. And I'm going to read a quote from President Ruto of Kenya to lead into my question. It says here, when people cannot travel, businesses cannot travel, entrepreneurs cannot travel. And my question now is, we're talking about economic integration. Can we have true economic integration without the freedom of movement of people? I'm Nigerian. With my Nigerian passport, it's easier for me to get a visa to France or Netherlands than a South African visa. I'm of the opinion that if you have free and better movement of people without these restrictions, you can, there's better cross-pollination of ideas and movement and better business across the continent. So I guess it's sort of a comment and a question to get your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. The third question.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Adel Bouda. I'm DCM of the Algerian Embassy in Delhi. I have a question to Ambassador Kundal Punit and Ambassador Ahmed. Here, the reflection in India from the perspective here, debate is very precise and very pertinent at this stage, especially after the integration of Africa to G20. And we heard here some proposals that the Indian side is interested to open a EU representation here to maintain the dialogue, permanent dialogue between the both sides. I don't know if there is concrete progress in this matter, or even if it is considered seriously. On the economic side, there is one challenge here, very tough challenge. From the Indian side, they annulled the tariffs to the African continent. But still the level of trade is very, very low. So from Indian perspective, is there reflection on how to find solutions to overcome this problem? And then I think also Ambassador Ahmad mentioned governance problem. I think when we mention governance problem, there is also an opportunity for cooperation from the Indian side. If there is also reflection on how to help the African Union to strengthen its governance mechanisms and and build together more fruitful dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right at the back.
Hi, my name is Lara Farrar. I'm a journalist, fellow at the University of Southern California, Annenberg, but I was based as a foreign correspondent in China for 10 years and very closely watched the relationship between China and many countries in Africa evolve. Maybe not so, I'm not as familiar with Morocco, but certainly South Africa. This is a big question, and sort of answer it however you want to, but where do things stand with China right now in terms of the various relationships and sort of the debt diplomacy and the infrastructure development that has been going on with that relationship? Thank you.
Thank you. The last question.
Hello everyone, I am Pindile from the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. I shared with my boss that I'll be part of this session, and he asked me to say, proudly that it feels good to be African just by being in this room today. But perhaps a comment, and I'm not sure if it's a question, but it's something I would like us to reflect on, is how maybe perhaps colonization has really stripped Africans from just really thinking and having a vision for the continent. Some of the things that you've spoken about, 4IR and digital sort of infrastructure. I work for Thabo Mbeki Foundation, and part of our project is education, and we are giving students laptops and tablets, but they don't have a classroom, they don't have smart boards, they don't have the infrastructure. So we are really playing catch up, and the whole world has moved, and we are really not getting there quick enough. So that's something that's a concern to us. Another thing when it comes to infrastructure, more than just ICT, is the fact that every January, we find at the bridges, goods standing there. There's a traffic of 3 kilometers. We don't have the proper infrastructure to move goods between countries, or things get stuck at the borders. How do we mitigate that? And another thing is the fact that you talked about how you couldn't have a meeting because there were countries that were not just agreeing. And again, that points, that lack of consciousness, that what are we really driving forward? What is our vision for Africa? Because these policies are drafted by us, or in fact, we can change and reform them, but we are not, because we are just, there are personalities or different interests. So how do we come together as Africans and have a vision? And what is that Africa that we want? And how can we just start mapping up steps to get there? Thanks.
Thanks, Pindile. Let's, before I ask the panel to respond, it's our conversation. I think there may be comments, responses from the floor. Any comments, any responses from the floor? Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's interesting to know, there's a saying that it's easy to find a solution if you know the problem. So this problem is known. So I'm wondering why the solution is not found, because you can't find solutions outside the boundaries of Africa. You have to sit within the boundaries of Africa. And I wanted to clap when the AU, spokesman or the vice president, spoke. And he was bang on. We have this EAC. So we have EAC visa. I wonder why there are only 3 countries giving EAC visa. Why not 5, which are part of the EAC? We have got COMESA, we've got SEDEC, we've got free trade agreement, but you will still find, trucks being stopped, buying there. Because, I had experience of traveling to about 26 countries, having done projects in about 14, 15 countries. Experience was great, but you're right, you want to call within Africa, it's atrociously high. You can call India at a cheaper price and call USA at a cheaper price, China at a cheaper price. So I'm both wondering and, kind of trying to, invigorate all of you. Why don't you sit down all together and find a solution? Thank you.
Thank you. There are a number of questions that have been asked. Maybe, oh, here. Apologies.
Thank you very much, moderator. My name is Jacqueline Mukanjira. I'm the High Commissioner of the Republic of Rwanda to India. I just want to express my heartfelt gratitude to all the speakers for their brilliant presentations. It was really good to listening to each one of them. I just want to also make 2 comments. Number 1 is on the visa issue, which was raised by my dear sister from Nigeria. I'm glad to inform you that Rwanda has already solved that matter. My country has proposed something so special, and we are implementing it. All Africans and all citizens from the Commonwealth of Nations and the Francophone member states with a valid passports, when they want to travel to Rwanda, they get 1 month free visa on arrival. So it would be good if other countries can also make that arrangement. Number 2, the Honorable Deputy Minister of South Africa has commented something about the support from SADC member states to Mozambique. Honorable Minister, I'm glad to inform you that my country, Rwanda, has also sent forces to Mozambique, and they are still there. And I'm glad to inform you that they are doing an amazing work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that intervention very much. Thanks, ma'am. Comments, responses from the panel, I think will be useful. Maybe let me start with Honorable Deputy Minister. I hope you don't mind. Let me start with AU, because sometimes when we talk, especially outside of our continent, it's as if we don't have Vision 2060, and we do. We have many things that we are doing, and the vision has been laid out. Maybe if you can speak to what is the vision.
I hope we agree on Chatham House rules. Otherwise, I cannot go back home. Seriously, we have a vision, and thanks to Mrs. Dlamani Zuma, she worked very hard to implement the agenda to 26.3. So we have a vision, but please keep on your mind, AU is an organization of states. You, me, we can agree on many things, but our country, we spend the time to negotiate on a single issue. So as an organization of states, we are not at the same level of European Union. European Union reached a level that you have the states, civil society can negotiate, worker can negotiate. So the integration is put very far. So I don't want to give any excuse. We have to challenge this, and we have to find a solution. But as a state, head of state decide. And I spend my time as advisor to say, President, I think we should do that. But I'm just advisor. I give him what I think is the best, and most of the time, he do what he thinks himself on his interest, and the interest of the country, and the interest of his friends, and many, many people. So, yeah, because we have a strategy, we have a vision, and we try to keep this strategy, the agenda, and it's very important on different perspective. But still, someone there talk about why we cannot fix it. It's just because there is kind of structural inequality still over there in the market. If you import chocolate outside as a raw material, 0 tax. If we prepare the chocolate in Ghana, we export in Europe, 90%. Those structural inequality needed to be removed. And then I was living in Chad. The whole Sahel have a huge livestock. But we still import meat and chicken from Brazil. every day, every week, Ethiopia itself, the company Ethiopian Airlines, is importing 3 containers of chicken. And just beside in Kenya and in Tanzania, they produce chicken. So we really need to challenge infrastructure, integration. And my sister from Nigeria, you're absolutely right. We shouldn't have a problem to travel. So some country like Rwanda, like Benin, by the way, we have the AU passports, and we are pushing. But the head of state themselves, in the day they accept the resolution, and then in the evening we try to implement, then we say, oh, we Nigerian, we cannot allow the ZLECAf, the economic integration, because we will pay more than South Africa, so please give us more time. So you see, we are trying to overcome all those obstacles as organization led by head of state, not by the civil society, not led by scholars or other people. So those are some challenge we need, but maybe I can finish on the opportunity. We have a lots of opportunities, whether in the school, whether in the university, whether in food production, on many perspectives. Myself, I come from an island where it's a volcano island. As a volcano island, it's very fertilizer. And we produce one of the single flower that is used for ladies by Chanel. Channel 5 is the most sold flower in the perfume in the world. And we are the one who produces the flower ilang ilang. So that can be transformed and finalized, not maybe for the European market because it's complicated, but Indian market, Chinese market, South African market, we can sell perfume to them. And we have to build ourselves our own channel for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deputy Minister, I'm sure it's early days for the Africa Free Trade Agreement, but maybe you want to touch on other things.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I think I just want to deal with the issue of the visa. Well, South Africa, we have passed a legislation that we are giving waiver to African countries, especially on the officials and diplomatic passport. So now we're quite aware that visa it's very slow, because we are learning on the new technology to offer that. We started to test our e-visa system, but what is different with other countries, South Africa, is that our international relations department, like foreign affairs department, is not dealing with visa. We've got a full department that is dealing with visa, which is home affairs. So in most cases, then when you experience problems, then the nearest office is international relations, but we had to transfer the information to home affairs. So that's the difference. That's how we're different with other countries, because in other countries it's only international departments that are really dealing with visa as well. So now we will learn. We are almost 30 years in our democracy. We'll learn. The second issue is the the Agenda 2063. I think the ambassador has just indicated that we have reached the 10th mark of the Agenda 2063. Let's look at the report and start to improve, and also force ourselves as the continent to implement the Agenda 2063. And in most cases, it has got good things that will happen. As more so, we're quite aware that our young people in Africa, majority of our population is young in Africa, and most of them are unemployed. So these are the issues that we need really to concentrate as a continent and make sure that we transfer skills. Yes, of course, I appreciate that most of our young people in South Africa and our civil servants, they got skills from India, which we really appreciate in terms of our bilateral relations. So we are looking forward to that, as South Africa will be the president of the G20 in 2025, next year. We are preparing, we are learning what happened in India, and we are also following and supporting Brazil. And what makes us happy is that, you know, the IPSA countries will be holding the G20 for 3 years. So we need to make an impact. So one of the issues that we're looking at as South Africa is to make sure that the SDGs are really implemented, because we are towards 2030. So we will emphasize on that, and other issues that are really coming from India, other issues that are also coming from Brazil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Let me go to India. Puneet, from your perspective, I also wanted to put you on the spot and comment on the visa thing, but I'm sure you don't want to talk about the visa issues.
We have e-visas for 33 African countries. Our visas are perfectly open. There's no country which is on a banned list, so to say. Anybody can walk into India. No hassles on that. Let me take two questions. One was specifically directed by the DHC of Algeria for me, and that is on the AU representation in Delhi. I'm happy to say that I was in Addis yesterday. I had a meeting with the DG of the African Union yesterday, and this is one of the agenda points that I raised with him. I said, why don't you have a delegation in Delhi? This was the third time that we've raised the question with them. We did that in July last year, and we did that during the G20 as well. Now, the answer that we got was, and the answer was repeated yesterday, they said, finances. He said, the AU is a member state-driven organization, and the member states aren't contributing enough for us to open delegations everywhere in the world. So my request to him stays, and it stays to the AU in general. Sir, please have a delegation in Delhi. It will do everybody good, including us. I see no reason why the AU, which is now a member of the G20, I see no reason why the AU, which represents 1.3 billion people, which represents 3 or 2.5 billion of GDP, should not have a delegation in Delhi, where we have over 150 missions. We host more than that, in fact, in Delhi, and we would love to have you here. On the issue of trade, I think we have pretty robust figures of trade with Africa. Last year, the trade we had with Africa has crossed 100 billion, all the countries put together. We are not comparing ourselves with China. I mean, that's like 260 billion. We are at 100. But those are figures that are rising up with every year. Our investments there have in the zone of about 75 billion, spread across the entire African continent. But the biggest investment we have is the Indian diaspora. Now, would it surprise you if I said that 12% of Indian diaspora, it's about 3.5 million people, stay in Africa? And I'm just not talking of people who've been there for hundreds and thousands of years. I'm talking of the new diaspora, which is actually into business, into trade. Mr. Ashutosh here was speaking about that. He's one of those people who's worked and lived in Africa. So there's a whole lot of people who are moving into businesses, into the service sector, IT, hotels, transportation, agriculture. Sarah is right. It is 60% of the world's arable land. But you have any number of Indian companies who are now moving into Africa to produce crops, just not for internal consumption, but also for exports. In fact, somebody quoted President Ruto. Let me just take him back to the visit of President Ruto. President Ruto came here in December, and in the joint statement, one of the main things that we have said is that Kenya is willing to offer land to Indian companies to grow food there. It's one of the agenda points right there. Similarly, when we had President of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu here, one of the points that came out in that joint declaration was setting up of an Indian industrial park near Dar es Salaam. Now, those are the kinds of areas which really kind of tap into Indian expertise, but which also feed into the requirements of Africa, the aspirations of Africa more than the requirements. And I think those are the things that we need to meet, are the aspirations rather than just look at the bare requirements. And I think all of us are completely clear on that. China, well, China is the largest investor, the largest trader, and the largest donor, and the largest lender to Africa. It's not going to change in the near future. I've already said that the costs of raising funds for Africa are high. Africa needs the funds. Somebody has to step in. We also do that. I did mention the lines of credit. We have lines of credit worth 12.5 billion that we have in Africa. We have built, completed, and handed over 206 projects. 81 are under design, and 65 are being built on the ground as we speak. We also have a massive program whereby we have helped African countries in need. I did mention vaccines. I did mention medicines, but food grains. last year, after the triple whammy of the food, fuel, and fertilizer that Ambassador mentioned about, you had many countries, where something like 30 countries from Africa, or maybe it's all across the world, I can't exactly recollect, but about 32 countries, we either gave them food as assistance, or we sold them food on commercial terms, because nobody else was willing to do that for them. Now, that also speaks of the strength we have as a food-growing nation, that we are not only self-reliant, we have food that we can help friends with. So those are roughly the ideas I have about the questions that were raised here. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sarah.
I think the time's up there as well. So.
No, we negotiated for time.
Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, so thank you. And just to probably address one of the questions by the gentleman, and we've been able to identify some of the challenges. And I would like to be solution-oriented for my last statement in this panel. I think, and you raised this issue. It's about the narrative around Africa. And I work for a think tank, so I think the main mission for us as a think tank based in Morocco is this willingness and ambition to contribute in shaping our own narrative. And I think this is very important because it has a direct link to with the cost of capital for Africa. Because the perception we have on the continent is shaped mostly by think tanks elsewhere and research centers elsewhere that shape the narrative. They shape the narrative around Africa, and then it reflects on the cost of capital, on how much we borrow money. So an example was given, I think, in a session yesterday, that for Europe to borrow money was 2%, for African countries was 15%, and Sahelian countries in the Sahel is 22%. So I think this is very important, and most of the interest rates are based on this perception of risk around Africa. And I think it's very, very important that we build local capacity so that we can have the regional and capacity that is necessary to move forward with the continental integration.
That's very important. Thanks, Sarah. Rachel, you have the final word.
Thanks. I think for me, my parting shot is we need to act. You heard earlier, I was born in Ghana. I actually grew up in Botswana. At the time that I finished my first degree, the HIV/AIDS was at the height of the pandemic. I arrived in Oxford, excited to do my research. I wanted to do HIV/AIDS treatment, do research into that. To cut a long story short, I ended up doing my research in antibiotic resistance. Why? In the UK at that time, the issue that they had was nosocomial infections. The reality is that we're the ones on the ground, we're the ones that know our issues, and we're the ones that need to act. We have Agenda 2063. We have a lot of great policies and frameworks, but the 55 heads of state, even with the support of their governments alone, are not going to be able to get it done. We need to connect those policies to the citizens on the ground. We need to reach out, take the lessons that we can learn from other countries, India being an example. We need to strengthen our connection to each other, and we need to act. And that's how we're going to change the economic trajectory. Thank you.
Thank you to my panelists and all of you. I am told that this session is closed, but not before we've had dessert and continue the conversation. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Session is closed.